Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Well, hi everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement Friday show. And I wanted to do something just a little bit different, so bear with me. As I record this on Wednesday of this week, it's August 17th, I just finished participating in a Q&A webinar called Outsource Talks, and it was led by Jamie Liddell, the editor-in-chief of Outsource Magazine and co-head of SIG in the EMEA region. So what I actually thought I would do is invite Jamie to participate in a quick kind of after the show episode. It was inspired by those reality shows that you see where they kind of continue the conversation after the episode is aired. So Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hey Phil, thank you very much for having me.
No problem, and thank you for having me on the webinar earlier today.
My pleasure. It's nice to not be in the hot seat now.
Right. Now I can ask the questions.
It seems like that half hour's gone pretty quick. Actually, I have to say it's been I don't know, the buzz is still kind of very much resonant over here, I think.
Yeah, you come off these things. I do it with the show, and you're kind of on a high still, so it takes a little bit of time to come down from that. You go in with being a bit of a bundle of nerves, and we were actually talking about this in the before the webinar went live. I think it's probably natural, and me hearing that other people feel like that too made me feel better about it. But you're still on that high.
So yeah, absolutely.
And actually, I want this to be more of a conversation, I think, rather than an interview. So don't hesitate to throw any questions my way as well as we go through it. But as we start, I have a bit of an easy one, and that's just to give some context. So I just wondered if you could explain for Art of Procurement listeners a little bit more about what Outsource Talks is.
Sure. So Outsource Talks is my attempt at creating a kind of talk show environment for the sourcing and outsourcing space. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of webinars out there, some of which are very, very good, of course, but they do tend to be very much a kind of one-way process with someone talking at an audience, quite often going through a product or a service. And I wanted to move away from that. I wanted to really create a chat show environment, get several different people from very different sides of the space, very different parts of the globe, perhaps every month. And speak on a broad range of topics. So the first half of the show is a series of one-to-ones, about, depending on how many people are on the show, but for about 10 minutes each, speaking to sourcing professionals, normally people who are quite well known in the space, such as yourself. You're the host of this show. Today we also had Kate Vitasek, who many people will know as the founder of Vested Outsourcing, and Don Ryan, who's a well-known KPMG partner in the US. So, figures of a certain standing in the space, bringing different perspectives and different experiences, and really spending the first half of the show speaking to them one-on-one about topics of their choosing, things which you're really interested in at the moment. And then the second half of the show, opening that up to not just Q&A, but a bit of intra-panel discussion as well, to really try and recreate that environment. This is our sixth one. They've been really good, really successful. I really look forward to them each month. I find myself learning a lot, as well as hosting. So they are a kind of high point of my month. And hopefully people would testify that they're definitely beneficial and worth a listen.
Yeah, and actually that was one of the motivators for me in doing the Art of Procurement, was to actually learn from the guests. So, kind of creating a platform that allows me to ask some questions that ordinarily maybe I wouldn't be able to, because I wouldn't have access to the people that I'm able to talk to.
Absolutely.
And then as people who are listening kind of learn as I'm learning.
Well, that's one of the things I love most about my job, actually. We have such a variety of topics and comments and themes, etc., that we cover both editorially in Outsource and in terms of Outsource Talks or the other stuff that I do. And it really is true that I learn something new every day. And I find that a wonderful thing for myself. And again, the ability on Outsource Talks to bring together such a variety of people, and to discuss such a variety of topics, I think that's a great thing, not just for the audience, but also for me. As you say, it gives me the chance to ask things that normally maybe would be kind of be outside my reach.
And we talked a lot in the show or the webinar today about procurement. Is that normal, or is it because you had a procurement guy on the show?
I wouldn't say there is anything normal about what we cover. There is no standard. It really does depend on who's on the panel on any given day. So, we had clearly with yourself, procurement was always going to be high up the agenda. I think, Kate's work, especially recently looking at sourcing models. Well, that's a key thing for procurement, and also she's been doing a lot of work with SIG University. So SIG, obviously being a very sourcing focused organisation, I think it was inevitable that procurement was gonna come up a lot today. But last month, for example, procurement was not really figuring too highly at all. It was post Brexit. We had a lot of discussion on that. The month before, artificial intelligence was and robotics was kind of to the fore. So there isn't really any one topic that regularly pops up. And I do try and achieve that intentionally. When I'm putting my panel together, I do try and make sure that we're not beating the same drum month in, month out, because I feel that we've got such a diverse audience that really we need to cater to that and not just become known as, the sourcing webinar or the AI webinar or anything,
One of the things that one of the guests, I think it might have been Don, said today, he talked about a revolution, and I think the context was for technological change as he looked at outsourcing and global business services delivery models. It's my ears, kind of pricked up hearing that, because I talk about a revolution in procurement. Maybe you're better placed to answer this because you have that independence. Are we overhyping things? Are we overhyping the impact of technological change will have on any business service?
I don't think we are, no, and I'm a firm believer in the fact that we as a species, not just as a profession, but as a species, are on the verge of something truly remarkable, and that's impacting business already. Don mentioned there are RPA and AI implementations going on now. It's not next week, it's not next year, it's right now. Have we revolted right now? No, we haven't. I think we are definitely early on in this process, but if you look at the potential for change that is implied by technology such as RPA, and certainly when you get kind of deeper into the more sci-fi stuff, the cognitive and the AI, it is so transformative, so fundamentally different, that I think the word revolution is absolutely appropriate. And I think there is a danger of overhyping anything in this space. Absolutely. If I look back over the years I've been in this business, not too long, a decade or so, I look at things that, cloud, a huge buzzword that was all over the place. And then you think, well, hang on a minute, cloud actually has been pretty revolutionary. There was an immense amount of hype around cloud, but it really has done the job, And I have no doubt that when you look at what AI and RPA and those kind of things are going to achieve, I really do think that we are going to be very different. We're going to be in a very different place in a decade than we're now.
Do you think that there's going to be a kind of an event? There'll be something that happens which changes things quickly, or my perspective is always that we're kind of slow to change and we adapt it incrementally. If you were a betting man, where would you put your money?
So there's a term which comes from evolutionary science, which is saltationist, which means moving in leaps. And I think to a certain extent we have that kind of process going on, and in fact it's that combined with steady change. So let me explain what I mean. If you look at something quite kind of out of the blue, I think probably for most people over the last couple of months, Pokemon Go has emerged. It's come from nowhere. All right, obviously Pokemon's a very strong brand, but the actual game, the software has come from nowhere, and in an incredibly small amount of time, it's become one of the most popular apps ever downloaded. It's had millions and millions and millions of people all over the world using it, and it's all of a sudden it has taken augmented reality and it's implanted it right at the forefront of people's thoughts in terms of gaming, for example. And it's an augmented reality program that they have on their phones here and now. And if you were to have spoken to people a couple of months before Pokemon Go came out about augmented reality, they may well have just said, okay, yeah, this is definitely going to drop at some point, but we're not quite near it yet. And now, a couple of months after the fact, we have articles in the most prominent and prestigious business journals all over the world looking at the impact of augmented reality on the enterprise, looking at how people are going to have augmented reality interactions with their appliances at home. It's been that kind of radical event which you mentioned, which have changed things. And I think things like that come along, and the next day the world is a different place. And I think there are various different things which will take place over the next decade, which will be like the Pokemon Go phenomenon, and the world will be a different place after each of those. I'm not able to predict what those are, but I have no doubt they will be there. At the same time, alongside those, we have this steady incremental, less kind of dynamic evolution which is going on, and those two things combined means actually that we are experiencing pretty rapid, pretty fundamental change day in, day out, whether or not on any given day there's something Pokemon Go-esque happening.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting to think of it like that. I've not really thought of it on those terms, where you do have these single events that are not necessarily even foreseen, or they're low probability, but then it captures people's attentions and they start focusing on how that can help them and change them in what they do.
Absolutely. And I think that will happen on a global level, and it will also happen on an individual level. So, people will come into work one day and it may well be that they have a new piece of kit as part of their daily job, which is a robot, mm-hmm. and they're, not necessarily sitting alongside a robot, but they are interacting with some robotic process technology which wasn't there the day before. And from the perspective of the world of business, that one event, that one change might be completely insignificant, but from the perspective of that one professional doing his or her job, it will be a radical change. And if you look at those things taking place day in, day out all over the place, they do add up to something pretty tremendous and something pretty transformative.
And so you talk about events, where you wake up one day and the world is a different place. And it's kind of a good segue into Brexit. And you wrote pretty passionately about Brexit. I think it was the day after the vote, when we all realised that the UK had voted to leave the EU. We've got the benefit of a couple of months of distance and maybe some clear ahead. So I just wondered what your thinking is right now on Brexit.
Well, I think, on a personal level, my feelings haven't changed. I think it's a terrible mistake. However, it is what it is. I think we're not really in a very different place from where we were the day after the vote, frankly. Mm-hmm. I think, the immediate repercussions were political change here in the UK. We had a change of prime minister. I think there were things which needed to be pretty quickly resolved in that area before anything else could happen. Now, I know discussions are ongoing. I think we are, frankly, in the dark in a lot of areas to some very interesting and very consequential negotiations that are going on behind the scenes. Right. I think as we said at the time, I think this is going to be a pretty gradual process. It seems as though the initial kind of the market trauma has settled down somewhat, but I do feel that people are still genuinely looking on this quite negatively. I've spoken to quite a few people over the last month or so, and generally speaking, people in positions of seniority in the business world, most of them, and by no means all of them, but most of them that I've spoken with do believe that this is a mistake and it's going to damage the British economy. And obviously, there are other questions beside the economic ones, but I think from an economic view, I think people generally, people in power, etc., generally feel that this is not a good development. The ramifications of it are obviously huge, but again, what those ramifications actually are right now, I still don't think we're much further in the clear than we were the day after.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how it's really going to evolve. I wrote afterwards about the fact that I can see not much actually changing at the end of the day, and I don't know if that's just my hope rather than me being realistic. But you mentioned about all the things going on behind the scenes. You've got to think that it's in everybody's best interest for this to have, at least from the European side, for this to have as little impact as possible on the role that we play, and I'm sure there'll be some gives and takes to make that happen.
I think the European, the primary impulse now from the rest of the EU is let's make sure that this doesn't lead to further fragmentation. Right. I think generally it's tough to say this, because I hate what this implies, but I think there's not going to be a lot of sadness in the long term that the Brits will leave the EU. Mm-hmm. I think that we have always been seen as on the outside. We are not members of the Eurozone. We are not party to some of the other. We're definitely in the second tier, if you like, of EU members anyway, despite our economic size. But I think that in the long term, I don't think there's going to be too much lamentation, as long as it doesn't lead to the further fragmentation of the EU, which is definitely the top priority. The reason, the way that is going to be achieved, I think, is by making sure that things are a bit tougher for the UK than we might hope. It's not. I don't think anyone wants to make it an easy process for the UK to leave, because that would act as an incentive to the people in other European countries who want to get out as well. And I think one of the things which the Brexiteers really didn't focus on, for whatever reason, or didn't accept or didn't want to accept, is that the things that we are going to have to concede in order for us to retain access to the great things that we would enjoy as a trading partner with the EU, as we currently are, mean that a lot of the things which people hate about the EU and voted against will stay in place. We hear a lot of talk about the Norwegian model, yet Norway has an economy which is very different from the UK's, for starters, but also which, as a trading partner of the EU, involves them having very little say in decisions by which they have to abide. Mm-hmm. And we will be in the same position. It's not like all of a sudden we aren't going to have to abide by various treaties that have been in place for a long time, and yet we'll be able to trade with the EU, as freely as we'd like. If we want access to that market, we will have to bend over, and we will have to grovel, and we will have to accept certain things which people voted against, which is one of the reasons why I thought it was such a mistake to vote out in the first place, because actually it was a very emotional vote and a very emotional decision, and it was rejecting certain things which people have been very unhappy about, such as the free movement of people within the EU. Mm-hmm. Yet the EU itself has made it very clear that if we are going to retain a special status and have the trading relationship that we want, we will have to accept the free movement of people. And that is something which I don't think the Brexiteers really want to accept, but they're going to have to.
No, there's definitely going to be some give and take, even though we've had the vote. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all ends up, and I just wish it wasn't an experiment at our expense, if you will, or saying our expense, as a country, because you just don't know the way that things are going to go. But I could actually probably talk to you for an hour just on this issue, and I want to just kind of come back to wrap up about the discussion that we had today on Outsource Talks. And you're about to write, I think, your recap of the event to post out tomorrow, which will actually be yesterday for people listening to this as we published the interview on Friday. What are some of the key things you're going to be writing about?
Well, I tend not to write about too much, actually, because what I really want to do is push people to the webinar. Yeah. At the start of the Outsource Talks series, I wrote a really long, almost transcript of the first episode, and I was just about to publish it, and I thought, you know what, this is actually really silly, because what I want to do is push people to hear the great thought leadership which you and Kate and Don exhibited earlier today. I don't want people to read a column line and that's it, and then go on their way for the rest of the day. I want them to engage with that webinar. I want them to hear what it was you had to say. So I'll actually only be writing a very loose kind of recap on some of the top points. It will be a short column, and it will contain the link to the registration page where people can listen to the recording, and that will be it, because what I really don't want people to just read my column and go on. You guys were fantastic earlier today, and I want that to be rewarded. So I think I'll probably mention a little bit about the sourcing models discussion Kate had. I'll definitely allude to the bit on talent that you brought in as one of the challenges that CPOs are facing. I'll certainly refer to some of the stuff that Don was talking about with regards to AI and robotics. But it will be, I will try not to go into too much detail. I know that might sound like a cop-out. If anyone's listening, this is the editor not wanting to write a long column. I assure you it's not. But I really do want people to listen to what you guys had to say. It was a fantastic conversation. I was really honoured to be able to host it, and I want as many people as possible to be able to listen to it.
All right. Well, what I'll do then, Jamie, is I'm sure that by the time that I publish the show notes for the episode on Friday, you'll have a link back to the recording. So I'll post a link in my show notes for today's episode. That's going to be at artofprocurement.com/outsource talks. And that's all one word. That's artofprocurement.com/outsource talks. I'd really encourage you to go over there, listen to the webinar, listen to it for what Kate and Don has to say as much as anything. And Jamie, just thank you for inviting me to participate. And thanks for joining me on the show today.
Phil, it's been absolutely my pleasure. Please consider that an open invitation if you ever want to come back. And as awesome. I always have an open invitation also for you to submit some editorial. Maybe we can have a bilateral interview on paper or electronic paper as opposed to audio this time.
No, it sounds good. Well, thanks a lot for being a part of the Art of Procurement today. And I know that it would be great to get you back on for a longer episode in the future. So I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again soon.
Looking forward to it, Phil. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.